Welcome to Body Talks, the podcast where we unpack society's relationships with body, beauty standards, and everything in between. We're your hosts, Madison.
And Olivia. And today we're diving into a topic that shaped a generation's perception of weight and self-worth, fat phobia in the 1990s.
Now, we've seen fat phobia across many centuries. One of the most infamous examples is the 19th century's illustrations of Sarah Bartman. Bartman was an enslaved woman whose voluptuous physiques were displayed in exhibitions in France and England. While Bartman's story was rooted in racial exploitation, it also highlights early examples of fat phobia and its stigmatization of non-European body types. Her fuller figure was deemed grotesque, come on, by European audiences, reinforcing the idea that larger bodies are other and unacceptable. Her treatment established a precedent that the ridicule and objectification of bodies that did not conform to thin Eurocentric ideals were seen as like bad, you know. And I feel like some of our readings have even mentioned this. I mean, with Bordeaux's reading feeling like we can't take up space, physically or literally.
Yeah, no, Susan Bordeaux's whole philosophy about women feeling like they can't take up space really fits into this whole conversation because to her, the male is associated with mind, whereas female is associated with body, and body here is seen as the negative term. And obviously, like if you're a woman, sometimes you can just be seen as your body or even as a sexual object. And that can create a lot of shame and guilt around the female body. So she talks about anorexia and other eating disorders as a way to escape the female body and obviously take up less space.
Yeah. I was like, what did the 90s really look like in terms of like media and like the internet? 'Cause I know nowadays, like you can have access to any streaming platform you want, but I think it looked a lot different back then.
That's true. But before we get to TV and everything, I think it's important to talk about everything that was culturally significant going on in the 90s that really set women up to feel like they need to shrink. First of all, the CDC declared that the US was experiencing an obesity crisis, but I was reading an article by Yvette Dione about how this is really just a fat phobic myth. At the time, the director of the CDC was just blaming fat people, encouraging them to eat less, exercise more, and also spreading that people who know someone who's overweight should be telling them to change their behaviors. And this both created and perpetuated the idea of fatness as like a moral issue. And that really showed up in healthcare systems with biases towards fat people, blaming them for being lazy, lacking self-control. And it's important to mention that determining whether someone is obese is based off of BMI, which is really a racist and sexist form of measuring someone's health because it was based on a white man a long time ago.
Yeah, I was gonna say, wasn't like the BMI like the whole staple point was a white man, and then like women weren't being used in medical studies until like the late 90s, early 2000s, where they were finally receiving representation, something that they did not see.
Yes, let alone like that's one thing women were almost never included in medical studies, let alone fat people who were medically healthy.
Yeah, especially because like the definition of like fat is so like diverse, and that could mean like a whole number of things.
Yes.
Like some people say that like a size 8 is considered fat, while others consider like a size 20 to be fat. And
That's
like
true.
some clothing sizes look a lot different
Right.
based on the sizes.
And the reality is that body size does not necessarily coincide with health at all, which is a big myth that was really like again being perpetuated in the 90s. But Sabrina Strings is an important scholar on this topic and how fat phobia has ties to racism, as you already mentioned. But some of the reasons she explains that the 90s were a perfect climate for this uptake in fat phobia was that big agriculture and big dairy markets were thriving from large government subsidies, which meant that like producing more fake foods was quicker and cheaper than ever, which as you know, like today, it can be expensive to eat healthy, but that's when that started and was also getting worse. And in general, just like the Reagan Clinton era was very cis, white, male heteronormativity, which is harmful for women's rights movements and racial rights movements because it directly correlated with a resurgence of the thin white beauty standard because of the conservative politics at the time.
Yeah, talking about like the overall like quality of food and the cheapness of food, like even looking today, like I know Erewhon or whatever that fancy frou-frou supermarket, they're charging like $16 for like spheres of ice.
No, literally. It'll be like superfood glow smoothie, and it's like,
$20 for an eight
yeah,
ounce. I'm like,
exactly.
okay, I could just only make it at home.
So then that became a class issue where if that's all you can afford to eat, sure, you might gain weight and then get blamed for being fat and lazy. Um, but speaking of the food we're eating and dieting, the weight loss industry was like booming at this time, making billions of dollars, like low fat diet packaged foods. Diets were super popular, like Atkins, the Sugar Buster, and even the Friends diet, which is apparently eating the same healthy Cobb salad every day because that's what Jennifer Aniston
Oh
supposedly
my
did.
gosh.
And obviously, people are very influenced of celebrities at the time. And Friends was obviously very popular in the media, which I know we'll get onto later. But speaking also on 90s trends, Chelsea Noble wrote an article about fashion trends coming back. But basically, what was trending at the time was a lot of crop tops, spaghetti straps, mini skirts, slip dresses, low rise pants.
Mm.
We see these on TV a lot, and who do you only ever see them on? Thin bodies. And obviously, we see them on supermodels because that is what is high fashion. And the 90s was like the era of the supermodel. Think Kate Moss, Cindy Crawford, Naomi Campbell. But this created an issue because the supermodels promoting this highly unattainable thin physique is now tied to high fashion and beauty standards. And that's where the term heroin chic arose, which glamorized the look of a drug addiction with like a sunken, gaunt face, sickly thin
Oh.
figure. That's what was trending, which is obviously going to be harmful to especially young girls growing up watching this be what's represented in wearing the cute clothes and who's popular. Speaking of popular, pop culture, TV, and internet was becoming increasingly more popular and more accessible in the 90s with growing channels on cable TV, the beginning of streaming services, as you'd mentioned. Like most families had TVs in their home and some kind of access to the internet, which also meant that like internet communities were starting to form, which like this is when we started to see pro anorexia or pro ana communities beginning to develop on like the darker parts of the internet, which is in direct relation to the type of body that was promoted because that's the whole end goal. So, but back to TV, audiences preferred to channel surf. And like with this culture going on in the 90s, that means they're going to be fed not only all these beauty standards, but a whole bunch of fat phobia, specifically in sitcoms. Pretty much any episode of any sitcom in the
Oh.
90s, you're bound to see at least one fat phobic joke.
It's like playing a game. It's like,
Yeah.
oh, which episode's gonna be about fat phobia? Where's the fat comment gonna be? Because I know it's gonna be in this 20-minute episode.
And there's often like longer plot lines that are just ridiculing fatness.
I say, speaking of which, like we cannot talk about fat phobia and like fat characters without mentioning Monica from Friends. I
Exactly.
mean, like one of the episodes we looked at was season 3, episode 6, the one with the flashbacks. I mean, it offers a nostalgia, like and like some kind of glimpse into the characters' lives before the start of the series. While Friends is known for its comedic exploration of missed romantic opportunities and who's hooking up with who, you know, we still have to look at like the really detrimental depictions of Monica as like her younger, heavier set self, commonly referred to as Fat Monica, because that
Yikes.
always has to be negative. This
Exactly.
portrayal has sparked significant discussion over the years, particularly regarding its impact on youth and impressionable viewers.
Hmm.
Monica's weight is frequently treated as a punchline throughout the series, as many sitcoms did in the
Yes.
90s, unfortunately. Reinforcing harmful stereotypes and perpetuating societal fat phobia. This comedic framing of her past size as a source of shame or ridicule contributes to the overall stigmatization of larger bodies, sending a troubling message of self-worth and desirability among, people, and it's being tied to thinness. For girls growing up watching Friends, it's a cultural touchstone.
For
Like
sure.
everyone had that
Everyone
on.
knows what Friends
And
is.
everyone was sitting there like, "Oh, Joey's so hot," and like
Debatable.
I'm just the messenger. These depictions have influenced their perceptions as like the viewers of body image and contributed to fat phobia. In our analysis, we're going to examine how Fat Monica was framed within the show and its broader societal context in 90's media and the lasting impacts and portrayals of like the audience navigating issues on their own body image and their own self-acceptance. And like we can sit here and talk about, I mean, we came in into the 2000s, and so we
Hmm.
only watched Friends like once it passed. So like,
Yeah.
I mean, we weren't there when it happened, but like an article I read by Emma Spector kind of went into how women felt like during that time. And Janet Cora Quirk, who's 41 now, remembers the episode, and says, "Of course, Monica's lines got laughs. At age 17, I felt that reaction so deeply. It said a lot about what the world expected from me. Deprivation, self-hatred, cattiness and pain, whatever it would take to keep me thin." Like
Mm.
that is a crazy statement because, you think about all the things that we can do to ourselves
Right.
and our bodies and how much, fear like women have like put into themselves by like others' opinions. And so just like the idea of being thin is like the goal
Right.
when that very much is not the case. But you have media that tells you, or like doesn't necessarily have to like outright tell you that fat is bad, but through like making like fatness a joke or
Yes.
deciding if it's gonna be like the key point of the character. Like
And
that's troublesome.
and they're also like making binge eating a joke in that episode, and it's so harmful because like having a healthy relationship with food is a very difficult thing. And if you're watching that and you like can sometimes feel like you overeat or have trouble binge eating, that's gotta feel so embarrassing when that's all
Yes.
making fun of. No wonder people have problems with it.
Exactly. Like you think like the minute thing that she did was eating Girl Scout cookies
Right.
and like apparently having more than two or three, that's considered bad and she's gonna get fat and oh my
Right.
goodness. Like I'm sitting there having a Panera chocolate chip cookie and I'm like, dang, ain't this a shame? But like not even just Janet, but like another person, Natalia Silva, who's 29, learned not to question friends like and like the overall portrayal of women's fatness as a child because as she put it, growing up fat, you just get used to being the punchline. So it's gotten to the point that, you know, these women have just not only like sadly accepted it, but they feel like it's now the norm because society has hit them over the head with like at this point a box of Girl Scout cookies because, they just want to grow up in a world that offers diversity and acceptance of bodies that are not just like thin. Like
Yes.
crazy concept, but
Concept.
but I think that we should have diverse bodies and diverse bodies in media. Oh,
Yes. And
gosh.
we've come a long way with diverse bodies in media, but also have we? Because now that we understand what was going on in the 90's and how such a popular show perpetuated so much harmful rhetoric that we barely scratched the surface of, you can easily see why so many women have struggled with their own body
Mm.
image. So if you're listening to this and you're a Gen Z and you're like, why do I hate my body? Why do I have a hard time with this? Like, it makes sense and it's not your fault.
Yeah. I'll say the
With
Gen Z and millennials, the ones that grew
Yes.
up on
Grew
Friends,
up with
and
it, whose moms grew up with
I
it,
was about to say, and now
and
you see like the
it's being passed
moms.
down. But even modern shows can showcase 90's trends, like in Euphoria with the fashion. And there's just been a resurgence of 90's fashion trends and body ideals lately because fashion trends tend to cycle like every 20, 30 years, but it also has to do with nostalgia of the 90s and for people who weren't around, like fantasizing for a time that one wasn't born yet. And also the uptake in trends of vintage clothing, thrifting. Not only are the fashion trends coming back, but we see time and time again women's bodies are being treated as a trend with standards changing every decade. A Michigan Daily article discusses this well, how the BBL era, as they put it, is ending. Because the last decade, we have seen that thick, curvy, slim waist, Brazilian butt lift, that is what's in. Think the Kardashians. But into the last couple of years in the 2020s, we kind of are getting the sense that thin is back in, with celebrities reversing their BBLs, going on Ozempic, getting buccal fat removal surgeries. Hello, heroin chic, gaunt, sunken face.
That's what said. It's like we're bringing it
Like
back because, like,
this, and now that look is again associated with high fashion, high class, ideal beauty, what it means to be a beautiful woman. Also, if you look on TikTok and social media, weight loss content is everywhere. And it
oh,
gets to the point where a lot of it is not even like health content or fitness content. It is straight up promoting eating disorders, telling young impressionable girls this is what you should be doing to get skinny, because now skinny is cool again. You want to wear low-rise jeans, you need a flat stomach, blah blah blah. There's so much fitness
true.
culture, thinness culture.
I was like every single time I
Yeah,
see on TikTok with like the workout videos and I see like a
yes,
little body check in the mirror, I'm like okay.
right,
I'm like, oh, not another one.
right. It just feels like the pressure for women to get smaller keeps getting more and more. Hello, Bordeaux.
It's like girl, you were way ahead of your time because shoot, we're still talking about you. And
Right.
it's like this resurgence. I mean, like, look at like Kim Kardashian. Like she had this like major BBL back in like what
Mhm.
2016, but like now like got a lot of lip filler removed, got like a majority of her BBL removed because like thinness is now back,
Yes.
which is like it's like, oh great, we're bringing back the cycle. And with like fashion trends, I'm all for bringing back like bell-bottom jeans and like
Right.
like flare pants
But
and
they
like
can be for anybody.
exactly. It's not like an exclusive like thin only club and like thin nowadays like we're seeing like another trend of it because you have like Brandy Melville where it's a one size fits all where it's like I'm like okay, not exactly the
Yes.
most one
But
size fits all kind of
the thing
stick.
is, bodies are meant to be different and to be healthy. And we have moved forward a lot with body positivity movements, more variety in celebrities' bodies, more representation, advocacy, etc. Even though it's still very flawed and problematic.
Mm,
But in order to like create a more healthier body image, we kind of need to try our best to shut off being told what we need to be and that constantly changing, because it's really just not fair to women, not fair to anybody. And like body image is kind of an identity. Dr. Christine Luce, who's a professor at Stanford University, she talks about positive body image, including a healthy overall self-image where you have appreciation and self-compassion for your body. And she also talks a lot about culture and media and how strongly it has influenced body image by telling us time and time again what's attractive and what is not. So seriously, do not beat yourself up for being
mm,
self-critical, having a negative body image. You're constantly being fed something unattainable that you're
exactly.
supposed to achieve. And honestly, that's the story of women. You're always being told what you need to be doing
Exactly.
better.
Especially by those
Yes.
who men.
Yes. So we just need more representation in mainstream media and advertisements. We need larger bodies, different bodies, in order to help like heal the collective body image, because it really shouldn't be on the individual every time.
Yeah.
And another thing that would be helpful is to reduce the talk about other people's bodies in any way, ever, in any commentary, any comedy. Appearance should not be how we're judging and measuring people. We need to put more value on who we are as people outside of what we look like. Because when we like who we are inside, both self-image and body image tend to improve.
I was say there's no need to be making fat jokes in 2024. I promise you, there is so much more that you can talk about without mentioning someone's body. And
Exactly.
all that to say, for those who li are listening and feel some semblance of connection to what we're saying, give yourself a hug
Literally.
because, you have gone through so much and you will
Yes.
continue to be going through so much because of so many out influence, whether it be like your family or your school, your friends, social media, you
Yes.
know,
Your
y-
mom, your aunt.
you're battling. Trust me, and you're
Yes.
battling. So give
And it's
yourself a hug.
fine.
Exactly. And they're going through the same problem. So,
Right.
maybe it's time that you sit down with your parents and, say like, hey, I know you're hurting, and so am I.
Right.
And like this is a cycle, and I don't want my children to be like this, or if you're gonna have children, because shoot, in this modern day socioeconomic status, not for me. But
Hey
now,
there, girl.
give yourself a little hug,
Yes.
because
Give yourself
try
a hug. And you deserve to take up the space that you
exactly, go get a Panera chocolate chip cookie.
do.
Now, next episode, we're talking about the harmful stereotypes of new modeling groups and new modeling fashion. Next top model. Oh, we got a lot to talk
Girl.
about. So stay tuned for next week. Again, this is your host, Madison.
And Olivia.
All right, y'all. You have a great day.